Metabolic flexibility, rebuilding resilience without extremes. Over the last two episodes, we've named something many women quietly feel but rarely articulate. Your body is not broken and you are not failing, but something has shifted. Responsiveness has changed. Resiliency has narrowed. The old effort to outcome equation no longer feels reliable. Once that realization settles in, the natural question becomes, now what? When adaptability feels reduced, the instinct for many women is to increase pressure. If the body feels less responsive, perhaps it needs stronger stimulus, stricter plans, more aggressive fasting, harder workouts, tighter structure. The assumption is almost automatic. If resilience feels diminished, push harder until it returns. But adaptability does not rebuild under force. It rebuilds under stability. When the body perceives threat, whether that threat comes from underfueling, excessive intensity, chronic stress, or simply a lack of recovery, it narrows its responses. It becomes protective, it conserves, it braces. That narrowing can feel frustrating, even stubborn, but is often self-preservation. Today we are going to talk about metabolic flexibility, not as a trend or a performance strategy, but as a description of resilience. More specifically, we'll explore how resilience returns in midlife without extremes, because flexibility is not something you command back into existence. It is something that grows when the internal environment becomes steady enough to support it. Before we go further, a quick word of wisdom. I'm not your doctor, and this podcast isn't a substitute for professional medical advice. I'll share what the research says, what I've learned, and what might support you along the way. But before making changes to your diet or health routine, always check in with a qualified healthcare provider or practitioner. So if flexibility isn't rebuilt through force, what does it actually look like? What does it mean in real life for a body to become adaptable again? Let's start there. If flexibility isn't rebuilt through force, then it helps to understand what flexibility actually is in the first place. Metabolic flexibility is simply the body's ability to adjust to changing demands without overreacting. It's the capacity to move between fuel sources, to respond to a meal without dramatic spikes or crashes, to tolerate a slightly longer stretch between meals without feeling panicked, and to recover from stress or exertion without days of depletion. It's not about perfection, it's about adaptability. Earlier in life, this adaptability often feels natural. You might skip a meal and still function well. You might have a higher carb dinner and feel steady the next morning. You could push harder in a workout and feel mostly recovered within a day or two. The system felt responsive and resilient. As we move into midlife, that resilience can narrow. Hormonal fluctuations influence how the body handles blood sugar and stress. Sleep may become lighter or more fragmented. Recovery can take longer. The nervous system may remain activated longer after a demanding day. None of these shifts are dramatic on their own, but together they reduce the stability the body once had. When stability decreases, flexibility decreases. The body becomes more reactive. It prefers predictability. It tolerates less variability. It moves toward bracing rather than bending. That bracing can show up as energy crashes, heightened hunger signals, increased irritability when meals are delayed, or stress response to what once felt manageable. This is where many women misinterpret what's happening. Because flexibility feels reduced, the instinct is to challenge the system more aggressively. If the body feels rigid, the assumption is that it needs stronger training, more fasting, more intensity, more structure. The goal becomes forcing adaptation. Adaptation or resiliency does not happen under sustained threat. It happens when the body perceives safety, when nourishment is consistent, when sleep is prioritized, when movement challenges without overwhelming, when stress is acknowledged rather than ignored. In those conditions, the nervous system softens its guard. Cortisol patterns begin to stabilize. Blood sugar responses become steadier. Energy levels smooth out. Not because you demanded it, but because the system no longer feels under siege. Flexibility is less about discipline and more about capacity. Capacity grows slowly. and it grows best when strain decreases first. Instead of asking, how do I push my metabolism to become flexible again? A more useful question might be, what would allow my body to feel stable enough to adapt? That shift may not sound dramatic, but it's foundational. It changes the direction of effort. It moves you from force to support, and support is what rebuilds resiliency. If flexibility rebuilds through stability, then what does that actually look like in everyday life? It rarely looks dramatic. In fact, one of the challenges of rebuilding metabolic flexibility is the process can feel almost underwhelming at first. There is no surge of intensity, no extreme reset, no sweeping overhaul. Instead, it begins with consistency that the body can trust. For many women in midlife, rebuilding flexibility starts with predictability rather than variability. Regular meals instead of long, inconsistent gaps. Adequate protein and balanced carbohydrates instead of rotating between restriction and overcorrection. Movement that challenges without exhausting. Sleep that is protected intentionally rather than negotiated at the end of the day. These are not glamorous changes, but they create rhythm, and the body responds to rhythm before it responds well to intensity. When meals are consistent, blood sugar begins to stabilize, not because carbohydrates are eliminated, but because the system no longer feels uncertain about supply. When strength training is progressive without becoming punishing, muscle tissue adapts without triggering excessive stress responses. When walking and lower intensity movement are integrated regularly, circulation improves and recovery shortens. When sleep is extended even slightly, cortisol patterns begin to smooth out. None of these shifts are dramatic on their own, but together they communicate safety to the system. When the body perceives safety, it becomes less reactive, and as reactivity decreases, flexibility gradually widens again. This is often where expectations need to be realigned. Many women assume flexibility means the ability to tolerate anything at any time. Long fasts, intense training blocks, dietary swings, unpredictable schedules. But true flexibility is not the capacity to endure extremes. It is the ability to adapt without excessive strain. In midlife, resiliency grows when the body experiences steadiness long enough to rebuild trust. That trust is physiological, not emotional. It shows up as steadier energy between meals, fewer dramatic cravings, workouts that leave you feeling worked but not depleted, mornings that feel clearer, and stress responses that resolve more quickly rather than lingering. These changes can feel subtle at first. They may not register as dramatic results, but they are early signs of regained adaptability. Rebuilding flexibility is less about expanding tolerance through pressure and more about restoring capacity through support. When stability became less because cumulative load was more than recovery, stability returns. That's not right. When stability was less because cumulative load was more than recovery, stability returns as recovery consistently meeting load again. That balance does not require perfection, it requires steadiness. And in this season, steadiness may be the most powerful metabolic tool you have. You eat regularly, move consistently, protect sleep, and manage stress with awareness. You are not lowering standards, you are establishing order. Order reduces internal chaos. As chaos decreases, systems synchronize more effectively, hormones regulate more smoothly, energy stabilizes more consistently. Adaptability widens naturally, not because it is forced, but because the environment supports it. In a culture that celebrates extremes and visible intensity, rhythm can feel unimpressive. It does not promise dramatic transformation. It lacks spectacle, but rhythm builds durability. What lasts is rarely constructed through spikes of effort. It is formed through patterns that can be sustained without strain. As metabolic flexibility rebuilds, it does so in response to rhythm, not because the body has been demanded to comply, but because it has been given the steadiness required to adapt. This is where wisdom and physiology quietly align. If a previous season required discipline, this one may require wisdom. Wisdom about pace, about load, about what can be layered in, and what needs to be reduced. Wisdom does not resist change, it responds to it with appropriate timing. And often, the most mature response is not escalation, but steady continuation. Before we close, I want to widen the lens just a little. When we talked about rebuilding adaptability, we're not just talking about physiology, we're talking about posture, because the instinct to force change isn't only physical, it's often spiritual. Many of us learned quietly and faithfully that effort produces stability, that discipline protects us, that consistency guarantees movement, and in many seasons of life that has been true. Effort did produce visible return. Faithfulness felt proportional. The body cooperated. But Scripture has never promised proportional outcomes. It invites faithfulness, not control. It calls us to steward what has been entrusted to us, our time, our habits, our bodies. But it does not ask us to secure results through force. There is a reason Scripture speaks so often in the language of rhythm. From the opening pages of Genesis, creation itself unfolds in cadence evening and morning, work and rest, seed time and harvest. There is repetition, but there is also pacing. Nothing is hurried beyond its appointed time. Nothing is forced outside of season. The pattern itself carries wisdom. Biblical wisdom is rarely described in terms of intensity. It is described in terms of alignment. Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. Passage is often quoted in visible life transitions, but it applies just as deeply to quieter internal shifts. Midlife represents a change in internal season. There may have been a time when aggressive capacity building felt appropriate and manageable. There may have been a time when elasticity or resilience was wide and tolerance is high. But seasons shift and wisdom adjusts accordingly. There's a difference between stewardship and self sufficiency. Stewardship says, I will tend wisely. Self sufficiency says, I will make this work. Faith in this season may look less like striving and more like steadiness, less like proving endurance and more like honoring capacity, less like tightening control and more like widening adaptability. You are called to care for your body. You are not called to command it. And sometimes the most faithful response is not escalation, it's recalibration. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Flexibility grows in environments that feel stable. Before you ask your body to tolerate more variability, give it consistency it can trust. That may look simple on the surface. It may even feel unimpressive, but simple does not mean insignificant. This week, choose one rhythm to protect. Perhaps that means eating at more consistent intervals rather than testing longer gaps. Perhaps it means scaling a workout slightly so recovery improves. Perhaps it means protecting your sleep window more intentionally than usual. The goal is not perfection, it is steadiness. When the body experiences steadiness long enough, it begins to widen its tolerance naturally. Energy smooths, stress responses settle more quickly, recovery shortens. These changes often happen quietly, but they are signs that adaptability is returning. You do not need extremes to rebuild resilience. You need rhythm. If you're looking for foundational support as you reestablish steadiness, I'll link the supplement brands that I personally use in the show notes. I choose them because they support stability and are high quality without overcomplicating things. If you decide to purchase through those links, it supports the podcast at no additional cost to you. Next week, we'll continue this conversation by looking at how variability can be layered in wisely once stability has been restored. But for now, focus on rhythm. Until next time, friend, stay nourished, stay cozy, and choose wellness one thoughtful step at a time.